Dad threw away Mom's birthday present, then sat down expecting her to make dinner. But this time, she never returned. It was my mother Bess's 60th birthday. Outside, a light snow was falling, blanketing Boston's streets in winter's gray. People hurried by, collars up, heads down. I stood in front of the old house, clutching a large pet carrier, feeling unexpectedly nervous. Inside was a Maine Coon with a thick, luxurious coat, a cat I had carefully chosen and reserved a full month in advance. She used to say that when she was younger, all she ever wanted was a cat, but life always got in the way: groceries, bills, the burden of everyday survival. Every time we passed a pet store or saw someone cradling a kitten, she'd stop, watch quietly for a moment, then whisper, "I wish I had one like that." So, this time, I made it happen. When I stepped inside, she was in the kitchen, scrubbing the stove. She turned at the sound of my voice, her eyes lighting up the moment she saw the carrier in my arms. "Is that?" I nodded. "Happy birthday, Mom. You always said you wanted a cat to keep you company." I remembered. She froze for a second, then lifted her hand to her mouth, her eyes welling up instantly. The cat peeked out from the carrier and let out a soft meow, as if acknowledging her emotion. But before she could even reach out, a sharp, impatient voice rang from the living room. "What the hell is this?" My father, Bard, had risen from the couch, his eyes darting between the cat and my mom with pure disapproval. He stepped closer, his voice low and bitter. "You spent money on that?" I opened my mouth to explain, but my mother instinctively shielded the carrier, her voice barely above a whisper. "It wasn't me. Faye got it for me." "Got it for you? Do you have any idea how much these things cost? Do you even know how little you get from Social Security, and you've got the nerve to accept something like that?" His voice rose, sharp and cutting. Footsteps shuffled down the stairs. My younger brother, Bobby, appeared, his face still puffy with sleep. "Seriously, Mom? Are you losing it? What about the food, the litter, the vet bills? Who's paying the gas next month?" The room grew thick with tension. My mother stood at the edge of the kitchen, clutching the trembling cat. She didn't say a word. I looked at her hands, calloused and worn from decades at the stove, now gently wrapped around a tiny creature that had done nothing but exist. In that moment, I saw something that felt both familiar and completely alien. She was the one celebrating her birthday, yet she looked like a trespasser in her own home. I drew a breath. "Dad, I gave her the cat. She's always wanted one." "I don't care who gave it," he snapped. "It's not staying. This house is messy enough. I don't want to see that thing here." The cat let out a high-pitched yelp, startled. My mom tried to soothe it, but before she could, my father grabbed the carrier out of her hands. I lunged forward. "Dad, it's snowing outside." "So what? It's got fur, doesn't it?" he said, already swinging the door open. A blast of icy wind hit my face like a slap, snowflakes stung my skin. "Bard, don't!" My mother's voice cracked behind me, but he didn't stop. He stormed out to the front steps and set the carrier down, whipping around to throw one last blow. "You want a cat? Wait until you can afford one." He slammed the door shut behind him. Silence. My mom stood frozen by the entrance, staring at the snow and the small, shivering carrier on the porch, her gaze fractured like glass. The wind whooshed in again. I followed her eyes to the cat, curled into a ball, shaking from cold and fear. Slowly, she crouched down, cupping her face in both hands, and began to sob, quiet, broken sobs that twisted something deep inside me. I walked over and rested a hand gently on her shoulder. She didn't look up. "You know, Faye," she murmured, "I used to believe if I just held on long enough, things would get better." She sniffed, her voice still trembling but steadier than before. "When your father started his business, his temper was already bad. I told myself he was under stress, that I should be more considerate. I could handle it. Then Bobby was born, and he told me to quit teaching altogether, said the family needed me. But it wasn't about need, it was about control, about making sure I had no ground to stand on, no voice to raise. I thought once you kids were grown, once we were older, he'd mellow out. But I'm 65 today, and not only did he not say happy birthday, he threw away the one thing I've wanted my whole life. She finally looked up at me. Her eyes were wet, but something new flickered there, something calm, unfamiliar, unshakable. I'm not leaving because of the cat, Faye. I'm leaving because I finally understand. I've never been allowed to want anything in this house. I didn't say a word. I just held out my hand. She hesitated for a second, then placed hers in mine and squeezed. I nodded. Let's go. She stood, reached for the shaking kitten, and held it close, like she was holding the version of herself that had been waiting for decades to be seen. The door closed behind us with a soft click. No one came after us. No one called her name. The snow kept falling. The wind was still biting. But for the first time, I knew my mother was finally walking towards something that looked a lot like freedom. That night, we rushed to a 24-hour emergency vet clinic. The kitten was diagnosed with hypothermia and extreme weakness. The vet said if we had arrived any later, it might not have made it. My mom sat on a bench in the waiting room all night, eyes fixed on the glass door that separated her from the tiny hospital bed. Exhaustion was etched into every line on her face. She clutched an old scarf tightly in her hands, the one I gave her when I left for college. And just like back then, she sat silently, absorbing the pain with no one to share it with. I watched her and couldn't help but think about the life she had lived, or more precisely, the years she'd been trapped. When she was young, my mom, Bess, was one of the brightest women in our town. She taught piano at the local school and wrote essays that were occasionally printed in the local paper. Parents praised her for her talent and patience, saying her music could calm even the rowdiest children. The town library invited her to host reading events. People respected her, she had a presence. She never dressed fancy, but she was always neat and composed. When she smiled, faint lines would form at the corners of her eyes, like little crescent moons. My dad, Bard, was back then considered an ambitious man. He ran a small construction supply business, charming and driven. In just a few years, he made a name for himself. When he was courting my mom, he used to wait outside the music room every day after work, even pretended to learn piano, saying, "I just want to understand you better." My mom was young and soft-hearted, maybe she really did believe that love was something people could grow into. But within the first year of marriage, he asked her to sell the piano. He said, "Why do you need to work? I can take care of you. And then, you're around those kids' dads all day. I don't like it." She stopped teaching piano, stopped writing too. He said writing didn't bring him money, said it was a waste of time. She gave in, quit her job, got pregnant, gave birth to me, and then my brother. At first, she tried to push back, but every argument ended with Bard going completely silent for days, no talking, no eating, no helping with anything. The house would turn into an icebox of quiet tension. She was always the one to give in, not because she was weak, but because she didn't want me and my brother to grow up in a war zone. When I got a little older and more aware, I once asked her, "Do you regret it?" She gave a tired smile. Regret doesn't stop the days from coming. Then she turned and went back to the kitchen. Her life ran on a loop, up at 6 o'clock, coffee brewing, toast warming, school drop-offs, laundry, cleaning, cooking, tutoring my brother, clearing the table, taking out the trash, wiping the windows. At night, she'd get maybe 10 minutes to herself on the balcony, looking out over the scattered lights of our small town, standing completely still. Once, I got up late for water and saw her there, alone. In her hands was a faded old notebook. I crept closer and saw the title, The Afternoon's Music, an essay she'd written years ago. She was still using a pencil, carefully editing each word, stroke by stroke, like the writer in her had never truly left. That's when I realized she wasn't someone who settled for a small life, she was someone pulled under by it. It wasn't that she never tried to break free, but every time she reached for something more, she was told, the kids are still young. And every time she dared to push back, she was smothered with, don't bring trouble into this house. When my brother was born, Bard looked her dead in the eye and said, don't even think about working again. You got 2 kids now. I bring in the money, you handle the house. He didn't ask, he declared. And she nodded, saying only, I understand. Then she wiped down the digital piano that had seen her through countless nights and gave it away to the neighbor's kid. Later, I asked, why didn't you keep it? She said, your dad thought it was in the way. She didn't cry, he didn't yell. She said it so quietly, but my heart sank inch by inch. I remembered something she once wrote before getting married, I want my life to carry more than the scent of a stovetop. I want ink on paper and the warmth of piano keys. But from the day she married my dad, all she got was the stovetop. She'd thought about leaving, I knew that. One time, Bard came home drunk and screamed at her, go ahead and leave me. See how far you can get. You'll probably be begging on the street by morning. You think anyone's going to help you? She stood in the corner like a nail almost pulled from the wall, frozen. I was just a kid then, too young to know what begging really meant. I only knew Dad was yelling, and it scared me. I ran to protect her, but she gently pushed me behind her and said, it's okay, he's just drunk. But she was the only one who'd ever really been sober, the only one who saw things clearly. The tragedy was no one ever let her live in that clarity. That night, for the first time, I truly saw what was in her eyes, a deep, heavy loss. It was as if she'd spent the last 30 years living under someone else's roof, and now, finally, she was ready to stand up. The day my mother finally moved out of that suffocating house, the wind was colder than it had been all week. Bess wore her faded cotton coat, its fabric thinned from years of washing. Her posture was brisk, almost startlingly so. She didn't glance around the house one last time, didn't double-check the drawers or cabinets, didn't linger at the door. She simply held the frail cat close to her chest and walked out. I carried an old leather suitcase beside her. Inside were a few changes of clothes and a small red storage box, something she'd kept to herself for 3 decades, her only private space in that house. Even Bard had never truly looked inside. By the time we unloaded everything into her new apartment, dusk had fallen. It was a modest place near the ocean, just 10 minutes from where I worked. The apartment wasn't big, but it was clean and bright, with a faint scent of sea salt in the air. Through the window, you could see a sliver of the horizon, and on clear days, sunlight would spill across the kitchen floor in golden angles. Mom settled into the fabric couch in the living room, the kitten curled into a ball on her lap. She stroked its back gently and whispered, "It's so quiet here." I nodded and walked over to take her hand. "You can finally get some real sleep now." She smiled, but her eyes were damp, not from sadness, but something else, something called relief, a feeling so unfamiliar on her face that it almost looked out of place. The next morning, I took her to a local community bank to help her open a new account. We were standing at the counter when a thought suddenly struck me. "Mom," I said, "you always told us you had no money. How did you afford to raise me and Bobby, especially those art classes you enrolled me in when Dad was so against it?" She blinked, then gave a sheepish smile. "I saved it from grocery money, bits here and there. And sometimes neighbors would give me cash for helping mow their lawns or watching their dogs. I never had my own account, so I just kept it hidden." Then she added quietly, "It wasn't for me, it was always for you too. You loved painting, so I signed you up even if it meant tightening things elsewhere. Your brother loved sports, those fees weren't cheap either, but I figured it out." My chest tightened. I gripped the edge of the counter, my throat thick. "Well," I said, trying to steady my voice, "now you can have an account that's just yours." She nodded and slowly opened the little red box, her hands tentative. Inside were bundles of old envelopes bound with rubber bands. Some were yellowed with age, a few were worn at the corners. She pulled out a stack and handed it to me. "This is everything I saved from grocery money, side jobs, little things. I just kept it all here. I flipped through them. Each envelope held 20s, 50s, and the occasional small bills, neatly organized and labeled by year. This is... I couldn't finish the sentence. She looked down, chuckled lightly with embarrassment. I couldn't save a lot at once, so I just stashed what I could, thought maybe one day it'd help you or Bobby. I never had my own account, so I guess this was my little treasure box. My throat burned. Those bills weren't just money, they were fragments of 30 years of quiet sacrifice tucked between grocery lists and evenings on the balcony. 30 years of clawing back scraps of freedom, $1 at a time. Then she said softly, "Don't underestimate your mom. I know how to count too." I couldn't speak. I just nodded and carefully tucked the envelopes away, as if sealing up a story she had written with silence and self-denial, a history made not with grand declarations, but with resilience, restraint, and love. Meanwhile, over on their side of the story, Bart and Bobby were living it up like nothing had ever happened. A few days later, Bobby posted a video on social media and made sure to tag me. He was sitting in Martha's kitchen, chewing on a thick steak. Behind him was her carefully curated open-concept layout, all soft lighting and decorative shelves. The table was set with red wine, scented candles, and what looked like a very expensive carving knife. His tone was smug, like he was delivering some kind of victory speech. "Dad's been eating dinner at Martha's lately, and guess what? Her lamb chops blow those bland, healthy meals Mom used to make right out of the water." At the end of the video, he even panned the camera to catch Martha's daughter, Jody, standing by with a spice jar, like some beautiful sidekick. The caption read, "Family dinners the way they're meant to be." When the video popped up on my phone, the screen actually seemed to blur for a second. My mom was right next to me at the time, quietly flipping through a digital cookbook. She was learning how to make a low-fat ricotta salad. I went to swipe the video away, but she glanced over just in time to see it. She didn't say anything, just let out a soft laugh. "They wanted me to see that, didn't they?" I frowned. "It's pathetic." She nodded. "It's fine. I used to cook every day, and they'd make faces with every bite. If someone else wants to play perfect mom now, let her." Her voice was so light it made me uneasy. "Mom, are you okay?" She reached down and stroked the kitten curled in her lap. "I used to get it all wrong. Now that no one's asking me to do anything, I can finally try what I want. Like today, I want to learn how to make a French dessert." She stood up, headed to the kitchen, poured some milk, and began pulling out all kinds of ingredients from the cabinet. I watched her move around the stovetop, precise and graceful, and it hit me, she wasn't running from her past, she was finally learning how to live. But Bart clearly wasn't ready to let us go that easily. The next evening, Bobby called. His tone was sharp, agitated. "Faye, you can't just walk out like that. Dad doesn't cook. The fridge is empty." I leaned against the doorframe, watching my mom on the couch with the cat in her lap, calmly munching on dried apple slices while watching a cooking show. Holding the phone, I said quietly, "Don't you have Martha?" I thought her cooking was better than Mom's. Silence, then the call ended. I think that was the moment they realized we really weren't coming back. By the 4th week after leaving my father's house, life with Mom had found its rhythm. Each morning, she blended homemade cat food puree for the kitten. At noon, she watched cooking tutorials and experimented with new recipes. By evening, she curled up on the couch, knitting me a scarf, occasionally gazing out the window toward the sea. I could tell she was finally truly beginning to relax. But not everyone was moving toward the light. One afternoon, during my lunch break, as I was finishing up a presentation draft in the office lounge, my phone lit up with a notification, "New family life #blessed." It was a video from Bobby. He stood outside Martha's garage next to a silver Tesla, gleaming in the sunlight, a big red bow fastened to the hood. He flashed the keys toward the camera, grinning like a game show winner. "Shout out to Dad for the early Christmas gift. New family, new momentum." Martha's roast beef tonight, can't wait. He exaggerated the words Dad and Martha, making sure they landed with extra weight. And of course, he tagged me. The caption came with a laughing crying emoji, just to twist the knife, and a cat emoji. I stared at the cartoon cat, my fingers brushing the edge of the screen. The message couldn't have been clearer. You two have your little cat and your quiet dinners, we've got cars, beef, and laughter. I closed the video without replying. That night, over dinner, I told my mom about it. She was stirring her first attempt at chicken and rice stew in an old aluminum pot, scraping bits from the edge as I spoke. He's never posted anything like that before, I said. He used to whisper to me all the time how greasy Martha was, how she acted like she was in some cheap soap opera. She chuckled. Maybe now he thinks it's his turn to be the lead in that soap opera. I looked at her. You're really not mad? She set down the spoon and turned to me, her voice calm but firm. Mad? Of course I'm mad. But if getting mad would make him return the car or grow a conscience, I'd go break this pot over his head right now. I was quiet for a beat. She continued, but you know what matters more? I'm done spending my time being angry. I gave them 30 years. The next 30 days, 30 months, those are mine now. In that moment, I realized her sharpest weapon wasn't rage, it was calmness. It was clarity. The next day, I took her to open her first official bank account. At the counter, her hands trembled slightly as she filled out the form. I guided her through each step, but I kept sneaking glances at her face, especially at the moment she wrote down her own name. She looked like someone finally stamping her own life with a seal of ownership. Afterward, we sat at a cafe next to the bank. She ordered a vanilla latte and took a careful sip. This $5 coffee, she said, I never let myself buy it before. But now I have my own account, I can. I smiled. And that money in your account? You earned it, one lawn mowed, one stitch at a time. No one gets to tell you what to do with it. She nodded. In that moment, she looked like a new driver clutching a license for the first time, nervous, excited, but glowing. But before our new life could truly take off, the old one reached out to tap us on the shoulder. That afternoon, I got an email from Bobby. Attached was a scanned letter signed by my father, Bard. This property was purchased independently before the marriage. It does not fall under her marital assets. If she wants to come back, she better forget about the money. Along with it was a photocopy of the deed with one line underlined in red ink, owner, Bard Miller. In the body of the email, Bobby had written, Faye, I know things might be tough for you and Mom right now. Dad said if you both take some time to think it over, maybe coming home isn't off the table. Leaving in a huff is easy, but it's smart to know your limits. That house is still where you both belong. Polite, soothing, at least on the pretended surface, like he was auditioning for the role of family mediator. But underneath it all was that same old smugness, no matter how far you go, the power is still ours. I almost laughed. Apologize? He really thinks he's some kind of monarch. I forwarded the email to Mom. She read it once, said nothing, and set the phone aside. Then she quietly walked into her room. A few minutes later, she returned with an old photo album. She set it in front of me and opened it to the first page, a photo of her at 22, wearing a pale pink suit, performing at the town's music festival. She was on stage, eyes lit up like stars. She said, that year, he sat in the front row and said, if you marry me, you'll never have to worry about money again. She paused, then looked at me with a clarity that sliced the air between us. Now I know what he meant was, whatever you want, I'll be the one to decide if you get it. I nodded. It's time we talked to a lawyer. By the time we left the law office, the sky had already darkened. Mom stood on the balcony, holding a printout in her hands, her full name at the top, followed by the preliminary details of her divorce petition. She stared at it for a long time, then said softly, you know, Faye, this is the first time in over 20 years I've ever written just my name on an official document. I didn't say anything. I simply stepped beside her and stood quietly. Neither of us mentioned Bart and Bobby's email. That whole "you have no place outside this family" thread had long since stopped being frightening. It had become something else, confirmation. Confirmation that we no longer belonged to that house. The next morning, Mom was up before me. She wore a pale blue button-down shirt and was frying eggs in the kitchen, humming softly to herself. The tune was quiet but tender. "What song is that?" I asked. She smiled a bit shyly. "Something I used to play when I taught piano. I think it's the opening to Claire de Lune." Then she paused, as if remembering something. "Do you remember that old keyboard case from the move? Is it still in the cabinet on the balcony?" I nodded and pulled it out from the bottom shelf. Inside was a portable electric keyboard, worn with time but polished to a shine. "Your father made me give away the real piano," she said, gently brushing a key, "but I couldn't let go of this one. I kept it hidden on top of the closet all these years." That afternoon, she sat down and began to play. Her fingers were a little rusty, but the melody smoothed out quickly. Her back straightened, her gaze sharpened. Her hands moved like they were recalling a language she'd once spoken fluently. I sat on the couch, just watching her light return. She wasn't reminiscing, she was reclaiming. From that day on, she practiced for an hour every morning. At my suggestion, she started recording short piano clips and uploading them online. In the afternoons, she taught herself how to shoot, edit, and post videos. I even found her a volunteer opportunity at a local library, a small community gig where she could play soft background music for readers every Friday afternoon. On her first day, she was so nervous her palms were soaked, and she nearly brought the sheet music upside down. But once she sat down at the second-hand upright piano and placed her fingers on the keys, the uncertainty vanished. She chose Moon River. The music spilled from the speakers like the start of a dream. A single mom passing by paused and whispered to her daughter, "My mom used to play this when I was little. I haven't heard it in years." A man in a beret flipped a page in his book, paused, and turned back to reread it. Maybe the song had stopped him mid-thought. I filmed her from the corner and uploaded the clip to her new channel with the title "My Mom Finds Her Music Again After 20 Years. To our surprise, it had over 600 likes in a week. One of the top comments read, "This Moon River is soaked in time. You can hear the life in it." When she read the comments, her eyes welled up. "You know," she said, "back when I taught, what scared me most wasn't having no students. It was playing in front of someone who'd say, 'What's so special about that?' But now I realize having someone listen and appreciate it, that's an extraordinary kind of happiness." I nodded. That night, she played longer than usual. Her final piece was her favorite, "What a Wonderful World." As she finished the last few bars, yes, I thought to myself, what a wonderful world. Her fingers lingered on the keys, then she whispered, "I think I'm ready to file the paperwork this week." I looked at her. Her eyes were calm. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "I always thought I couldn't live without that house. Now I know I should have left it a long time ago." I smiled. "Then I guess it's time we prepare for one beautiful fight." The day Mom filed the divorce papers was a bright, clear Monday. Sunlight poured across our apartment's small balcony, where the cat was dozing lazily by the window. Bess sat at the round table in a pale gray cardigan, carefully reviewing the legal documents I had printed out. Her expression was neutral, but I could see it. Her shoulders sat straighter than they had in months. When she signed her name, she paused for a second. "I can't even remember the last time I made a decision completely on my own," she said with a soft smile. "Well, this counts," I replied gently. That day, we officially initiated the legal proceedings. My friend Elena, a sharp and no-nonsense attorney, took on the case. She looked us squarely in the eyes and said, "You're not just getting a divorce, you're reclaiming everything that was taken from her." She promised to dig into every lead, trace every asset, and build a case that would not just be winnable, but unignorable. But before we could even send the formal demand letter, a phone call threw everything off course. It was Bobby. He sounded panicked. "Why haven't you come back yet?" "Dad's in the hospital." "Didn't you know?" I got to the ER waiting room as fast as I could. They told me it was a TIA, a transient ischemic attack, a mini-stroke. Mild, but serious enough to shake things. While filling out forms at the nurse's station, I saw Bobby slouched in a corner, scrolling through his phone and rhythmically kicking the chair leg. The moment he saw me, he sprang up and hissed, "You've been stressing him out. He's old. He can't take this. You both need to come home now." I stared at him. "You mean you want my mom to come back and take care of him? Or do you think getting sick suddenly erases 3 decades of what he did to her?" He flinched, didn't respond. Then he threw out something that momentarily took my breath away. "Mom's the one who abandoned us. She's the one who should take responsibility for all this." I almost laughed. My little brother, who lived rent-free in Martha's house, who bragged online about Teslas and lamb roasts, was suddenly the moral compass. "Your whole family might as well carve a statue for Martha at this point," I said, voice low but deliberate. "And now you suddenly remember my mom exists? Bit late, don't you think?" He turned without a word and walked back toward the ER. I didn't tell Mom everything, just said, "Dad's in the hospital. It's not too serious." She nodded, calm as ever. The next morning, she surprised me with a question. "If I gave up now, if I didn't go through with the divorce, do you think people would say I'm gracious? Forgiving?" Something in my chest tightened. She paused, then continued, "When I was younger, I thought being a good wife or a good mother was the only way to matter. But the more I tried to be who everyone wanted me to be, the more I disappeared." She went quiet for a moment, her gaze drifting toward the keyboard by the window. "After that library performance, a woman left a comment on my video. She said she used to sit with her son at piano lessons. He hated it, but she always dreamed of playing. When she heard me play Moon River, she said it reminded her of the girl she used to be." I grinned. "So you resurrected a mom's lost youth?" She smiled back. "Now I want to reclaim mine." I knew she had wavered, but I also knew that moment had made her steadier than ever. We scheduled another meeting with Elena to move into the next phase. Elena advised us to collect key evidence, focusing on 2 areas. The first, misappropriation of marital assets. Bard had used joint funds to purchase expensive items for Martha, a car, jewelry, home appliances, and more. And then, marital breakdown and psychological control, including financial coercion, lifestyle restrictions, and a persistent pattern of emotional neglect. I helped Mom dig through old records and credit card statements. We found joint account bills with large purchases, ones made while she wasn't even present. We also unearthed screenshots of early emails Bard had written to Martha. The language was intimate, and the dates aligned disturbingly well with family expenses that had always mysteriously gone missing. Elena reviewed the documents and nodded. "We've got more than enough." I turned to Mom. "Are you ready?" She took a deep breath. "This isn't a battle. It's a farewell to the version of me who stayed." That evening, after dinner, she played bridge over troubled water. As her fingers floated over the keys, she turned to me with a smile. "You'd be a bridge for me, wouldn't you, when I need it?" I smiled. "Always." She nodded. "I want to become that kind of person for myself too." Watching her play, I felt something shift, like a childhood memory reawakening. There she was again, the quiet, stubborn woman from my earliest years, the one who had always had music in her but never the space to let it out. Now, finally, she was playing just for herself. I'll never forget the weather that morning, cold but bright, like a blank sheet of paper, crisp and untouched, waiting for someone to write the ending. The courthouse was unusually quiet. Bess sat beside the plaintiff's table, dressed in her beige wool coat, her hair pinned up perfectly, her expression composed. She wore barely any makeup, except for a soft rosewood shade on her lips. Calm, resilient, and quietly resolute. I sat behind her, palms damp, but I didn't say a word. I didn't want to break her focus. Bart arrived in a dark gray suit, his expression grim. With him was his attorney, sharp-tongued, seasoned, and clearly expensive. Bobby didn't come, neither did Martha. Bart stood alone, like a general who didn't bring enough soldiers but still refused to admit he'd already lost the war. The judge was a woman in her 60s, wearing rimless glasses. Her voice was measured, her tone unwavering. The hearing opened with the defense. Bart's lawyer began confidently. This marriage lasted over 3 decades. However, the assets in question were largely acquired under the defendant's name. The plaintiff, having no significant income, did not directly contribute to household earnings. Thus, this is not a case for financial restitution. I could hear the grind of my own teeth. Then it was our turn. Elena stood calmly and began submitting evidence to the court: joint account transactions used for non-household expenses, high-value jewelry receipts, a vehicle purchase agreement. Most transactions were dated during periods when Bess was verifiably not present. These are not routine expenditures, Elena said. They represent repeated high-value gifts to a third party, violating the fiduciary duty within a marital relationship. Bart scowled, whispering to his lawyer, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. But it wasn't the receipts that silenced the room. It was Bess's personal statement. The judge turned to her. Mrs. Bess Miller, would you like to offer a personal statement about the marriage? She nodded gently and walked to the stand. She didn't look at anyone. She stared ahead, focused on some invisible point in the distance, as if telling a story she'd rehearsed 1,000 times, and this was the first time anyone truly listened. Her voice trembled slightly, but held firm. I was still teaching piano when we got married. I had a small studio.